and welcome back. This is the Great Classic Rock Debate. I'm Kenny.
I'm Steve.
And at the moment, we're missing Paul, also known as Rodney. We expect he'll be joining us sometime soon. We talk anything and everything classic rock. We try to keep it fun. We try to keep it interesting. If you're watching right now, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also share this. That we would love you for all of that. Let's get right into it, Steve. So, Steve, in 1974, 3 years before you were born, there was a song titled Rock and Roll Heaven. It was by the Righteous Brothers. Okay. So, and for me, I find it so ironic that you, even 3 years after the fact, you thought of the idea, hey, let's do a discussion about deceased rock stars who could put on a concert or a show or whatever in heaven, and it would be the greatest show ever. And let's sort of put that type of thing together. And I said, man, that's a great idea. I just assumed you must have heard that song, Rock and Roll Heaven, and you confessed, I never heard it before. But anyway, I was alive in 74, and I remember it was very popular on the radio. So several shows back, we did one titled Rock Stars Who Died in a Plane Crash, right?
Yep.
And I sort of informally titled that one The Day the Music Died, because we talked about Buddy Holly and Ritchie Valens in that. And even though lots of rock stars since that time have died in a plane crash, that's sort of the first. There may be something that predated that one, but as far as the history books go, this is the first one that people really know about. So I wanted to sort of open this discussion with a reference to four names. All four of these names predate what we call classic rock. But the reason I want to go ahead and mention them is because if there was going to be an oldies concert in heaven, these four guys would all be a part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and put these four names out there right now. So two we've already mentioned, Buddy Holly and Ritchie Valens. I also want to include their ages because it just makes their death so much more heartbreaking. Buddy Holly was 22 and Ritchie Valens was 17. Those guys died in a plane crash. I mean, the music listening public missed so much because of that. We missed out on so much of their future music. The other two names are going to be Eddie Cochran, whose big hit from the 50s was Summertime Blues.
Yep.
Been covered by a lot of artists, but there's nothing like that original. And then the other one is going to be Bobby Fuller, whose band was called the Bobby Fuller Four. He was actually in the 60s, and his big hit song was I Fought the Law. Okay. So, and even though he was a 60s artist, stylistically, these four guys all go together. They played the raw, original 50s. The term back then wasn't rock, it was rock and roll. And these guys played that, and they played it to the max. There was no compromise. It was pure energy. And at the time they were doing it, it was considered ahead of its time. These guys were musicians who were leaping forward in time and doing something totally experimental and different. So anyway, I wanted to start with those four guys. Again, not class. Oh, and I want to get their ages. Eddie Cochran was 21 and Bobby Fuller was 23. So again, all four of these guys were exceptionally young at the time they passed away. And so, in a sense, that makes it almost more tragic.
Oh, yeah.
To illustrate my point, I'm going to say it like this. Okay, so Paul McCartney right now is in his 80s. Okay, so if he were to die tomorrow, although you could certainly consider it tragic, you don't feel like you miss out on anything. We've gotten his entire lifetime of music, so we didn't lose. So to me, the guys who were young and in their prime at the time they died, it's a more compelling argument. There's a greater sense of loss.
Oh, yeah.
Because of that. Yeah.
they probably had, 20, maybe 30 years worth of music still left in them
Right.
because those guys, I mean, they were so talented and great songwriters, even though they had a very short list of works because they were only around for a few years. But
Right.
compare that to like groups today or artists artists today who every song sounds the same and there's not a lot of great songwriters today. I can make that statement.
I, I I think it's fair. Yeah, I would agree with that. So anyway, that's how I wanted to open it. So you're not going to be bound by any particular restrictions. Typically, our subject matter is classic rock, but you don't have to stay within those boundaries. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it over to you. Give me your next. Oh, here comes
Yeah, here
Rodney.
comes Rodney.
Yeah, let's give him just a second to join in, and
Yeah.
we'll catch him up, and then we'll go from there. So.
I'm here. Sorry.
All right,
No,
we're happy that you joined us. Can you hear us okay?
Uh-huh. Perfectly.
Okay, so we're just a few minutes in. I opened the dialogue by mentioning four names the four names all predate what we call classic rock, but their contribution is so significant. The names are Buddy Holly, Richie Valens,
Chuck Berry.
Summertime Blues, Eddie Cochran,
Eddie Cochran, yes.
and then Bobby Fuller of the Bobby Fuller Four. So all four of these guys were extremely young. Let me repeat their ages. Buddy Holly, 22, Richie Valens, 17, Eddie Cochran, 21, and Bobby Fuller, 23. And I was telling Steve, like, for me, there's a greater sense when they died young because you think of all the years of music that you've lost out on. Because if Paul McCartney dies tomorrow, it's tragic, but we didn't lose anything musically. These guys were so young. So for me, those are more compelling. Anyway, we are moving forward with the conversation. No restrictions. It doesn't have to be a classic rock artist. Steve, you're up. Go ahead.
So I took the approach of if there is a house band in heaven,
Okay.
these are the members.
Okay.
So on drums, John Bonham. On bass, and part of this is also because of there's not a whole lot of like rock bass players, and I think there's a reason for that who have passed away. And I think it's because typically bass players are a little bit more subdued. There's a lot of guitar players, drummers, and singers who are deceased, but a lot of bass players are still with us. But I'm going to
So
put.
are you suggesting that their lifestyle is more tame? Is that what
Yes,
it is? Okay.
exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So the rhythm section will be filled out with John Entwistle from the Who.
There you go. That's what I was going to pick.
Good
So
call.
so you can already kind of see the direction I'm going. On guitar, now this is a four-member band. Jeff Beck. So this is going to be really hard, gritty, classic rock. And then on lead vocals, now I'm going to pick the 50s version of this person, but Mr. Elvis Presley.
Okay.
And I think if you put those four people together in a room, you take Elvis at his prime in his early 20s and put those hard rockers in, I would love to hear what the types of songs that they would have created. So that's my pick for Heaven's
Okay.
House.
I like
Elvis was a big Zeppelin fan. We know that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like he saw them live, and then they saw him. They came to one of his concerts and said, "Hey, we're gonna play it good. We got Led Zeppelin here in the house tonight."
It was reading the book from Zeppelin's tour manager, and the name is escaping me.
Cole, Richard Cole.
Yeah, the name of the book is escaping me, but it was kind of like one of those
Hammer of the Gods.
Hammer of the Gods. That's right. There's a chapter in there where they meet Elvis, and it was kind of one of those scenarios where it's like two people who really kind of idolize each other, or one group and one singer, and they meet, and it's kind of like, I can't believe you like me. I can't believe you like me. So it's just very fascinating. So, but that's my pick. So
it's good. I like it.
So-
Hey, Paul, before I
Yeah.
turn over to you, I want to ask you real quick because Steve is at a disadvantage. He did not grow up on that song, Rock and Roll Heaven, the Righteous Brothers. But we talked
Okay.
about it a little bit. But how clearly do you remember that in '74 when that song was a hit?
Very unclear. Completely
Okay.
unclear.
Okay, so let me go ahead
Go
and
ahead.
say this for a minute or two. So the Righteous Brothers, I didn't even know this in 1974 because I was a kid, but they were pretty much a 60s act. I mean, by 1974, they were long forgotten.
Yes.
So for them to come out of nowhere, out of the woodwork or out of the mothballs or whatever, and create this song that was, I mean, it was an enormous hit. It went to number 1 on the Billboard charts, and buddy, it got so much radio airplay for a period of months. Okay. And even though I was a kid, it was very significant to me that all of the artists they reference in this song were all artists who had died like just within a few years. You know, none of them were like the distant past. So I mean, Jimi Hendrix is 71, right? 70 or 71. So was Janis Joplin. Yeah. And they mentioned Otis Redding. Okay, that would have been 68. But in 1974, I guess the fairest way to say this, in 1974, music was still young. At least what we call music, pop music, rock music, it was still young. I mean, it's not now, you know. The 60s is in the distant past, but in 1974, the 60s wasn't long before. So they did this song, and as I was telling Steve, it wasn't a rock song. In fact, the song was kind of schlocky, I thought, you know, but I think people really connected with it because it was a very heartfelt tribute to these artists who had all died fairly recently in recent years, who people loved. And you didn't have to love the song to appreciate what they were saying in the song, you know. And if there's a rock and roll heaven, well, you know, they got a hell of a band. So so it's kind of for me, it's kind of one of those things. As an older man now, I can hear it and really grasp and understand why it was such a big hit and why people appreciated it. Because as a kid, I didn't. I mean, it's, you know, I knew they were singing about whatever. I just didn't think it was a great song. I mean, I get it now.
But I heard something like I didn't even really like. Did they sing "You Lost That Love and Feeling" or am I getting
correct?
Yeah,
okay?
kind of two big hits from the 60s, at least that I'm aware of.
Yes, that Unchained Melody.
Unchained Melody.
Several others that were not quite as big, but those are the two. You're right. Those are the two big ones.
I thought when I first heard that song that it sounds like Joe Cocker.
But that was kind of their, but that was kind of their shtick. Was they called themselves a blue-eyed soul. They were white guys who had very soulful voices, and if you're not looking at them, you could easily think there's a black guys singing. And Joe Cocker, same thing.
Yeah, the first time I heard the Righteous Brothers was on Cheers.
Yeah, me too.
TV show.
Really?
Because that was Rebecca's
like bucket list thing.
That was her like favorite group was the Righteous Brothers. Yeah. And so and she would always mention, and then one episode they were on there and they sing "You Lost That Love and Feeling."
Okay.
I remember that episode
too.
too.
Hey, I'm going to go off topic real quick, but I got to say this. There's a video on YouTube, and I encourage you to pull it up. So I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a trend. There's a lot of YouTube channels where people do song reviews. They videotape themselves listening to a song and they've never heard the song before. And it's their reaction, basically. It's a reaction video. Okay. There's a lot of black people on YouTube who do these reaction videos to white rock songs.
Yes.
Right. And the reactions sometimes are pretty darn cool, you know. But somebody took all of these different reactions of black people reacting to the Righteous Brothers, and he combined them all together in one video. And it's titled something like "Black People Reacting to Blue-Eyed Soul" or something like that. And it is classic. Watching their face when the faces of the Righteous Brothers it's white guys. You know, it's great. So anyway, off topic. But if you get a chance, pull that up. Yeah, it's really.
I had the same reaction when I heard Cult of Personality. I saw they were black. I was like, "Wow, this is
perfect."
Awesome.
Perfect analogy. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it was. Yeah,
because that's a 100% 80s rock white song, you know, and it's a bunch of black guys. Yeah,
I had the same reaction.
Great singer.
When I saw Rick Astley.
Right. Right.
I was like, who is
Yes,
this
you are.
guy?
Right. Wait. Where's Barry White? Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I also
Right.
thought he lost a bet. Like this guy, okay, this guy Rick Astley, the real singer's black, but he lost a bet, so he had to go in there and act like he sang
And
it.
lip sync. Right. Right.
Oh
Right.
man, that's
And it probably wasn't until about 10 or 15 years ago that I saw what Rick Astley looked like. So, because I didn't watch like MTV. I don't know. I know they had a video, but I had never seen it. So,
Right. Yeah.
And then
Everybody
the,
was shocked when they saw what he looked like. Anyway, so Paul, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
all right. So the topic is band heaven, band's heaven, heaven and band, something like that.
Well,
well, it's
yeah.
basically dead
All right, here, all right, I got it.
artists.
If there's a
Okay.
rock and roll heaven, well,
Yeah.
you know they've got a hell of a band. That was the lyrics to that song. So we're
Okay.
choosing rock stars who are now deceased, but presumably in heaven. If we could put them into a concert, so who would it be?
Okay. Drummer Neil Peart, Rush. Bass player Chris Squire of Yes. And because Geddy Lee kind of fashioned his stuff after Entwistle and Chris Squire. A lot of the stuff he picked up and he was worshipped those two bass players. Now, guitar player is easy, Jimi Hendrix. And I'm going to go off and I'm going to say Ronnie James Dio as a singer. And I think that would be a really cool band because I think they would go all kinds of genres and you got a lot of just brilliant minds. That's the thing about like being in a band versus like when you said Jeff Beck and Hendrix wasn't in a band, I guess, but Beck was in about what 742 bands, right?
Oh yeah.
Like Clapton.
Right.
So I don't know if I never really understood that. Are their egos that big or they get bored easily? I never understood why. Like Page realized I want to be in his band, and Led Zeppelin speaks for itself. It's just weird how I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Like,
Well, who was the lead singer from Sugar Ray? Mark McGrath.
Mark McGrath, yeah.
So I heard an interview with him a couple of years ago, and he's
I
like
like that guy.
Yeah, he's like my probably late 40, maybe a few years older. But
Right.
somebody
Right.
asked him the same question because I guess Sugar Ray broke up or whatever.
Okay.
And he said, imagine if you still had the same job that you had when you were 17 years old working with the same people. He said, that's how it would be if he was still in that band with the same people. I'm like,
That's a fair
yeah,
point.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Never
but
thought of that.
I think his point's wrong. I disagree because that'd be like saying, I want to play. Paul Fields would like to play backup wide receiver on the 1972 Dolphins. Okay, you have this Hall of Fame team around. I just want to be in the room, right? So Page was in a band with these other three great players. So it's not like you're his job with the same boring people. You're in a job with Mozart and Beethoven and all these people. It's different. It's not being the same shit job that you're at where you got these greatest musicians with you, and the opportunity. Like, what if Led Zeppelin would have stopped after Led Zeppelin 4, right? The world
Everybody's
was a much crappier place.
I think
with that.
everybody has when you're at that level of success, you tend to get an ego. And a lot of people they're artists for a reason and they want to do their own thing and they don't like being told what to do. I mean, like look at the Beatles. Like they broke up and they were like
Yeah.
30 years old when that.
Yeah, hold on,
Steve,
Dave.
I agree.
Hold on.
Hang on, Paul. Steve, not only do I agree with what you're saying, you got immensely talented guys, so egos do clash, but you've also got clash of personalities. Listen, people who have all kinds of talent oftentimes have weird lack of personality skills, lack of social skills.
Yes,
So-
but that's exactly what I was talking about. Yes. Oh, this is going to be fun.
Okay.
How many sports teams do you know they had all this lineup, they have all stars, and they get rid of this one guy, and I call him the glue guy.
Yeah.
He's the glue. So, for instance, in Led
Right.
Zeppelin, it's John Paul Jones. Without him, there is no Led Zeppelin. There could never be, because Page and Plant had years to make all these albums, and everything Page made. Sorry, Jimmy Page, I love you. It was not all that great. And there was
No, I
something about
agree.
yeah.
That's
So
the sum is well, whatever that stupid phrase is, but once you getting everybody into the room together is much different than having, solo artists. I mean, look at the Stones. There's nothing better. Like Mick Jagger or Keith Richards solo is not better than the Stones.
Yeah, I know, but I think
Same
that
with the Beatles.
right. But the Beatles, you got to realize they made what 20 albums. They were together for a long time, and yeah. But I think they ran their course, just like the Police ran their course.
That was a couple of years, basically. But like the Beatles, by the time they broke, like, so 1970, when Let It
Yeah,
Be came out, what Paul McCartney was about roughly 30 years old,
yeah,
had his whole life still ahead of him.
Right.
And
right. But I'm saying with a guy
he's
like
done a
Beck,
lot of great solo stuff, but he's never done anything. And John
that's my
Lennon
whole
never did
point.
anything as good as they did with the Beatles. It's because you need there's something magical happens when you get these artists in a room together and they're forced to like just do something together.
Right, like remember in the movie Bohemian Rhapsody when Freddie Mercury comes back to the band and says, "Yep, they gave me $100 million to make these albums, and I got whatever I wanted, and I didn't have you guys there to say that's a stupid idea. And it sounds like crap. So I got what I wanted, and the album is crap. I needed
Yeah.
you three to rein me
Right.
in and get me this direction, right? You see what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
That was the problem with the Star Wars prequels. Nobody wanted to say no to George Lucas.
Right. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I mean,
We kind of got off on a tangent, but that's
no,
Okay.
but I want to point that out. Like, when you talk about a super group, you know what I'm saying? Like, you got to get people that are willing and going to subjugate their egos and, right?
well, most super groups do not pan out well. They produce maybe
I
one
agree.
album.
I know.
We've talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's, yeah, that's right. So I was like, why? But that's my problem with Jeff Beck. I love him. He's one of the greatest, if not one of the top three players of all time. But if you go up to anybody and put a camera, Mike, what's your favorite Jeff Beck song?
He's not a great songwriter.
But that's my whole point. No, everyone says, "What's your favorite Jeff Beck song?" Put a camera, and you're like,
They won't know. Yeah.
If you say, "What's your favorite Led Zeppelin song?" How long do you have? I could go on for 4 hours.
Right.
Same with the Beatles, the Stones, Sabbath.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
which album and which side do you want me to name my favorite?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. My turn's over, Kenny.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go and for the record, like you guys have worked harder on this because you guys are putting together whole bands, and I was just sort of coming up with individual names. So I'm going to name two names this time, and it's not going to be a whole band, but two I think significant names. And I would have named Hendrix, but Paul, you've already named him. So I'm going to go with Duane Allman as a guitarist.
Oh, is he dead?
Very funny.
Sorry.
Another one, 24 years old. 24 years old. The guy's life was just beginning. His career was just beginning, and it's, tragic. Oh, the Allman Brothers had a great career in music, but they did it without him, who was the main player. I've talked about the Allman Brothers before. I hold them in such high regard. And the fact that it was his brainchild, he's the one who came up with the idea, put it together, and then died in a motorcycle accident, and they carried on without him. The other one that I want to name is Scott Weiland. Okay. And again, I lean towards guys who died in their prime and at an age that was too young, as opposed to guys who died much later. The 90s practically belonged to the Stone Temple Pilots. I mean, there was other bands that were popular, but if I had to name who was the best rock band for the decade of the 90s, it'd be hard pressed to think of anybody that I would like more than the Stone Temple Pilots. And you could make the argument for Nirvana or Pearl Jam or whatever. I like the Stone Temple Pilots better. And he had, for me, just a great rock voice. His voice fits that style of music. Okay. And I know the guy had all kinds of personal demons and drug problems. I know that. So it never was going to surprise me if I heard that he had died early from an overdose or whatever. So at the time that Velvet Revolver then forms, and he's their lead singer, and they released their first album, which is really good. And I've complained on the show before that classic rock radio doesn't play them, but I just feel like he was a guy who really had the opportunity of carrying the torch of what we call classic rock into the 90s, into the 2000s, and the loss of him, I don't even know that classic rock as a whole has really continued, because the songs now that the classic rock station plays, none of us think of as classic rock, so those are my two that I really feel a tremendous sense of loss when they died: Duane Allman and Scott Weiland.
Steve?
No, that's good. Those first two STP records were phenomenal, and I thought they were on a trajectory to be the next Led Zeppelin.
Yeah,
back in the
Here,
day.
here.
they were. Anybody who was a fan of rock music, you couldn't dislike them. You had to like them.
I'm kind of laughing because when I put in dead rock guitar players, Jimmy Page comes up on the list.
No.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, my next band though is
Oh, hey guys, just quick. We're down to 4 minutes.
Okay.
So,
I'm going to leave out the bass player because there's only one other bass player that's really good. That's dead. Well, I shouldn't say only, but ZZ Top. So Dusty Bottoms. But if I'm putting together a new band, I want Bon Scott on lead vocals,
Hell yes.
Ginger Baker on drums, and then I'll go with Randy Rhoads on guitar too. So
He's not bad.
not bad. So I just like to think like, what would these bands sound like? So.
right.
Well, you guys remember that show? It was on VH1, and I forgot what it was called, and they had
Pop-up
that
video?
house. Huh?
Pop-up video.
No. They had a house and like a mansion, and they would bring in bass player, guitar, drummer, singer into the house. They don't know who's coming, and
Right.
they would have to make like 5 or 6 songs in a month or a week. I can't remember. So one of those shows had Evan Seinfeld of Biohazard. Sebastian Bach was the singer. Ted Nugent was the guitar player, and I forgot who the drummer was.
Wow.
And they had to come together and they had to make some songs, and it was wow. And watching, like what we said earlier, these people in the same house, and it was cool.
That's
And I can't remember the other.
cool.
Huh?
That's pretty interesting.
It is. It was. I was like, whoa, because you see like Sebastian Bach's a really cool guy, but Ted Nugent is like this center of the universe kind of guy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And he was. I think he called their band Damnocracy. That's what the name of their band was.
It's interesting.
I never saw that show, but that sounds like something. VH1 had some unique shows like that. It sounds like something they would have had, and it sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I forgot the other episodes, but yeah, it was good.
Okay.
Only other person I want to bring up right now that I could is just is Keith Moon.
Yeah.
Just great drummer. I think he was probably dropped on his head a lot as a kid. Like he was one of these guys like you couldn't take him to a bar because there's going to be problems. Like
Right.
Again,
crazy dude.
that's why there's a lot of dead rock drummers.
Yeah, like a Spinal Tap.
not bass players.
Okay.
No, I you know what, Steve, I agree with what you said. I think that's actually some truth to it. I don't know why, but
I think bass players are more have a tendency to be more laid back. Most of them don't want to be
in the spotlight.
in the spotlight. They just want to be, kind of just in the back,
Yeah.
doing their thing. And there's
Unless
nothing.
they're Kip Winger.
If you wanted to be in the spotlight, you probably would never have become a bass player. So.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of bass players who are frontmen. I mean, there's a couple, but
I mean, Lemmy,
yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to drop 3 more names if I can do that, and then
Go
we're
ahead.
going to be just about out of time. Okay, so first, Jim Morrison.
Oh, yeah.
So his contribution will endure forever, because even though he died young, you know what? I've got his right here.
Seven, right?
27. He was 27.
27. Yeah, it was part of the
Yeah.
27 club.
Yeah. So again, the ones who died so young, that really bothers me. But even though he died so young, man, the Doors have so many really good songs, and how many of those to this day are still in regular rotation on classic rock? You know, a number of them are. So they left a big footprint. Janis Joplin, I would name her. You know that she was mostly a cover artist. Even the songs by her that became hits were actually usually R&B songs. That, yeah, and but her voice, you know, I mean, she for the style of music she sang, the voice, it was the perfect voice.
Oh my God, great.
Yeah, and then the other one would be, hang on a second, I had it right here.
Greg Keen. No, I'm just kidding.
How could I forget this? Ronnie Van Zant. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And you could probably name, I forget which other ones, other Leonard Skinner members died in the plane crash, but he's the one who will always be the most well known.
Steve Gaines, I think the guitar player. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's correct. Ronnie was the face of Leonard Skinner, though. So those three, I would certainly want them to be in my heaven rock and roll band, and that would make me a happy camper. Okay, guys.
Hold on. The Van Zants who are still alive made a religious album called "Always Look Up."
Okay.
I just got it. It's a interesting listen. So I'm gonna so Always Look Up.
Okay. I do find it interesting that a lot of these Southern rockers from our youth have become so devoted to faith as they've gotten older. Because even Charlie Daniels, he's passed away now, but any interview talked about his faith and talked about God a lot. And the Leonard Skinner guys do the same thing. You know, they incorporate it into their music. So I think that's interesting.
Very cool.
So okay, before we wrap up, any final thoughts, comments, opinions, anything?
Buffalo lost today. I'm happy.
I love the Doors, and I would consider them hard rock from the 60s.
And Steve, when I asked Steve, put some thought in this, I said, "What's the greatest American band?" And Steve's the first person that ever responded with the Doors, so he gets big credit.
That's a great answer. Yeah,
great answer. No one had ever said that.
Paul, by the way, I told Steve that I think our sports channel is back open for business. I was able to sign in there. I had tried to sign in a million times, and it told me that channel has been disabled. So, and they never wrote back to me or never told me anything. And I tried to sign in last week, and I was able to get in. I go, wow, that's weird. So